Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, one triune God. Amen. In the midst of the pandemic, the parish is celebrating the feast of its patron saint in a very subdued way. We are unable to gather together and have our usual festivities. But at the same time, we are trying to celebrate the feast within our current limitations. We just listened to the gospel narrative according to St. John, chapter 20, verses 19 follows, where St. John gives a post-resurrection narrative where Jesus appeared to his disciples. First of all, having Jesus crucified and buried, the disciples who were hoping the re-establishment of the kingdom of David among the Jews were disappointed. And in a very political way, we can say that Jesus was crucified as a political criminal. And he was considered as a rebellious person against the Roman rule, because the Jewish idea of Messiah was that he will liberate them from the oppressive rule of the Romans. So his disciples initially thought that this is what will happen with Jesus, and they will be his courtiers and close associates in that sense. We see in the gospel narrative of Matthew, when Jesus tried to teach, St. Peter teaches disciples about his crucifixion and the final days. We see St. Peter saying, "No, Lord, it shouldn't happen." And Jesus' response was, "Satan, go away from me." Because the disciples were not interested in a suffering Messiah. And now, all that has come to culmination here, the first sentence itself says, they were scared of the Jews. They were not locked just merely for that, worried about some thieves or anything. They were worried about the Jews will come and get them. So they were worried about their own lives. They were scared because it specifically says, because one of the narrator himself is one of them. He said, out of the fear, they locked themselves in. And here we see a character who is missing in the midst of this crowd. What does it mean? Because if these people, the 10 of them, are locking themselves in because of fear, we see one out wandering in the city, I would say. So he is not scared. He doesn't have that sense of fear in him because he has trusted the Lord. And so he knows, or he is aware of the fact that he will be protected because he is one among them who is being sent out to make disciples out into the world. So here, he doesn't have the fear, but after his wanderings in the city, when he comes back, in between something else happens. So the ones who are locked inside, all of a sudden sees Jesus in their midst. Because Jesus, first of all, have to remove their fear and also show them and make them believe in his resurrection again. And here he gives them the Holy Spirit and all those kind of narrations we read. And then when this disciple, Thomas, comes back, the disciples were telling, the Lord came to us, and he was not willing to believe. I would say he is not disbelieving the fact that Jesus resurrected. But I think he must be disbelieving the fact that these people did see them. He is not disbelieving the resurrection story itself, but rather his own friends. So he says that, no, if you had that experience, I insist, for me to believe, I need to have that experience. This is something we have to remember very carefully. Of course, traditionally we always hear about doubting Thomas. Whenever somebody doubts on something, we refer he or she is a doubting Thomas. But here it is more than the doubt. He didn't say that I doubt, but for me to believe, this experience you had, I have to have it myself. So this is something we should be very careful about our faith journey. We do not take others' words and say that because of their experience, this is what will happen to me. Because each of us have to take that faith journey ourselves. It is because we have this attitude. We can take the intercession of the saints and they will do the job for us. And today we celebrate the feast of St. Thomas, and we can brag about our genealogy, our historical legacy, and say that, okay, St. Thomas is our patron saint. But we forget the key message of St. Thomas is appropriating for ourselves. Make that faith journey the experience of Jesus Christ our own experience, rather than depending on somebody else's experience. Yes, there is a cloud of witness. We know that these saints, the apostles, Holy Theotokos, all had this experience. But at the same time, all their experiences, the millions of people, the cloud of witness itself, is asking us to make the experience they had our own experience, rather than merely reading a book and say, okay, that is good. Because for us, spirituality and spiritual journey is an entertainment. Something we watch on Netflix or YouTube or on a documentary and then have a discussion in our living room. This is a journey like Thomas. As we are the children of Thomas, we have to say, no, I have to have that experience. I need to touch my Lord. I need to see him. I have to experience. And historically, there is another dimension, I would say, in this narrative. Because as we all know, Thomas came to India. We all are very proud of that legacy we have. He is coming and trying to evangelize an area where different kinds of philosophies are the playground of great philosophers, great philosophical traditions. The Advaita, the Buddhism, the Jainism, different kinds of. So when you preach there, this is to a community which doesn't have an expectation of a Messiah. So if you go and preach among the Brahmins and the Buddhists and the Dalits of Kerala or anywhere else in India and say that, oh, he is the Messiah, because who is that? Because we are not expecting a Messiah. And then he can narrate the story of Jesus being crucified. Then if somebody asks, did you see him? Did you touch him? What is your experience? He would have to say, if he hadn't had this experience, no, Peter told me, or John told me, or that would have been the end of his gospel story. So now he can, with confidence, he can say, I had that experience of the risen Lord. And the Lord himself, even though he chides him saying that the ones who believed without seeing are better than you, but remember the other apostles also didn't believe without seeing. They had seen him, that was the reason for their faith. But I would say here the Lord was referring to the entire clouds or entire groups of people who will be evangelized by the disciples who are going to believe without having the experience of seeing. So the Lord is not doubting or challenging or anything, but Lord was willing to concede to Thomas' requisition. I want to have that experience. And this is a methodology we all should have in our spiritual journey. We should be willing to take that journey where we have to insist, I need to have that experience. My spirituality is not merely dependent on the preaching of the Achans or Thirumenis. It is my journey. You can take their guidances, you can read the scriptures of others, everything, but finally, each one of us have to have that experience. What did the experience had, what impact did this experience have on St. Thomas? I think here you get the basic text of the church's Christology. Now, through this experience, how did Thomas respond? Is he asking, no, let me have a DNA test, or let me send you to the lab and see whether you are the right person? As soon as he see him, his response was, my Lord and my God. So here, it becomes the basis of the historical definition of church's Christology. Jesus Christ is the Lord, the Messiah, and God himself. So that profound statement comes in response to him seeing Christ. So we should be able to experience Jesus in our life at a personal level. Then we will be able to declare without any doubt, my Lord and my God. May God bless us all. Thank you.